My name is Stephanie Wilson, and I just turned 32. I was so excited to celebrate my dad's 65th birthday at Lucille, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. My siblings have always been obsessed with status and success, while I chose a different path. Little did they know that I had been hiding my true career from them for years. My simple blouse and modest jewelry were about to clash with their designer outfits in the most unexpected way. Before I dive into what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you enjoy stories about standing up for yourself, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences that might just inspire you. I grew up in what you might call an upper-middle-class family, but one that became increasingly consumed by appearances and social standing as the years went by. My father, Martin Wilson, was the quintessential self-made man. He started with literally nothing, the son of a factory worker and a waitress, and built a successful construction company through sheer determination and countless 16-hour days. My mother, Pamela Wilson, came from a similar background, but you would never know it from the way she carried herself. Once my father's business took off, she reinvented herself as a social climber extraordinaire, meticulously cultivating connections with the right people and obsessing over our family's image in the community. Then there were my siblings. My older sister Diana Wilson was the golden child from day one. She graduated from Harvard Law with honors and quickly secured a position at Peterson, Matthews, and King, one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. Diana never let anyone forget her accomplishments, dropping her alma mater into conversations where it had no business being and flaunting her designer wardrobe like it was part of her job description. My brother Thomas Wilson followed a similar path to success. He became a plastic surgeon with a practice catering to wealthy clients and celebrities. Thomas was perhaps even more arrogant than Diana, constantly showing off his latest luxury car or vacation photos from exotic locations. He measured his worth entirely by material possessions and the envy they inspired in others. And then there was me. I was always different from the rest of my family. While they were extroverted and status-conscious, I was more introspective and values-driven. I loved reading, creating things, and asking questions about why the world worked the way it did. This difference created tension from an early age. "Stephanie, why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother's refrain throughout my childhood. Look at Diana's perfect grades. Look at the important people she's networking with. Despite my different nature, I initially tried to follow the path my parents had laid out. I dutifully earned a business degree from a good university, though not an Ivy League one, which was my first disappointment in their eyes. After graduation, I accepted a position at a large corporation, settling into the trajectory my family expected. But 2 years into that job, I was miserable. The work felt meaningless, the corporate politics were soul-crushing, and I couldn't see myself doing it for the next 40 years. So I quit. That decision marked the beginning of my family's perception of me as the failure. "You had such a promising future," my mother lamented when I told them. "Now what will we tell our friends?" My father, who had once been my greatest supporter when I was a child, just looked disappointed. He didn't say much, but his silence spoke volumes. What my family didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was what I did next. While they thought I had taken a position as an assistant manager at a local bookstore, a job they found suitably embarrassing, I was actually pouring my savings and energy into founding an educational technology company called Learning Bridge. The company created accessible, innovative software for disadvantaged schools and students who might otherwise be left behind in the digital divide. I still remember the last major family gathering before my father's birthday dinner. It was Christmas, and we were all at my parents' house opening gifts. "This is lovely, Stephanie," my mother said with a tight smile as she unwrapped the cashmere scarf I had given her. "Very thoughtful. I'm sure it must have been quite expensive for you, with your situation." Diana smirked. "Must have been a whole month's salary from that bookstore, right, Steph?" "Some people find fulfillment in helping others rather than just making money," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. Thomas scoffed. "That's what people say when they can't make money. There's a word for it. Rationalization." My father just watched this exchange silently, occasionally glancing at his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. What none of them knew was that my company had just closed a major round of funding, valuing Learning Bridge at over $80 million. The modest bookstore job was simply a cover, a way to maintain a connection to literature that I loved while running my company behind the scenes. I lived in a comfortable but unassuming apartment, drove a reliable but unflashy car, and generally maintained a lifestyle that gave no hint of my actual success. Why did I hide my achievements from my family? Part of it was a test. I wanted to know if they could love and respect me for who I was, not what I had accomplished or acquired. I wanted authentic relationships based on something deeper than status. But another part was self-protection. I had seen how money and success had changed my parents and siblings. I didn't want that for myself. My relationship with my father was particularly complicated. When I was young, we had been close. He would take me fishing on Saturday mornings, just the two of us, and tell me stories about his childhood and the lessons he had learned the hard way. But as his business grew and our family's social aspirations expanded, he became more distant, more focused on appearances and connections. The man who once told me that character matters more than cash now seemed to judge everyone, including his children, primarily by their financial success and social status. 3 months before his birthday, my father had a minor heart attack. He recovered quickly, but it shook me. Despite our strained relationship, I loved him deeply and wasn't ready to lose him. I decided to try to reconnect, starting with his upcoming birthday celebration. Little did I know how that evening would unfold. The morning of my father's birthday dinner arrived with a mix of anticipation and dread. I stood in front of my closet, carefully considering my options. I could finally reveal the truth about my success by dressing the part, arriving in the kind of designer outfit that my siblings would immediately recognize as expensive. Part of me was tempted, I'll admit, but that would defeat the purpose of the years I'd spent keeping my success private. Instead, I chose a simple black dress. It was well-made and elegant, but not obviously expensive to the status-conscious eye that my family possessed. I paired it with minimal jewelry, just small pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother and a delicate silver bracelet. Looking in the mirror, I appeared neat and appropriate for a nice restaurant, but nothing about my appearance screamed successful CEO. My phone rang as I was applying a touch of lipstick. It was Melissa, my best friend since college, and one of the few people who knew the truth about my company and my family situation. "Are you ready for tonight's performance?" she asked after I picked up. "As ready as I'll ever be," I sighed. Part of me wonders if I should just tell them everything. End this charade. "You know my thoughts," Melissa replied. "I think it's weird that you've kept this secret for so long. But I also understand why. Just remember that whatever happens tonight, you have nothing to prove to them. You've built something amazing, not just financially successful, but actually making a difference in kids' lives." I smiled, grateful for her support. Last year on his birthday, Thomas spent 20 minutes telling everyone about the celebrity nose job he had performed, and Diana interrupted to talk about her promotion. Neither of them asked me a single question about my life. "Well, maybe this year will be different," Melissa said, though her tone suggested she doubted it as much as I did. After we hung up, I wrapped my father's gift, a first edition of his favorite Ernest Hemingway novel that had taken me months to track down. The book had cost more than most people would spend on a gift, but I knew my family would see it as confirmation of my limited means compared to whatever extravagant presents my siblings would bring. Lucille was located in the heart of downtown, occupying the entire top floor of one of the city's most iconic skyscrapers. I had been there many times, usually hosting potential clients or partners for my company. The restaurant's combination of spectacular views, impeccable service, and renowned chef made it perfect for impressing people, which was precisely why it had been chosen for my father's birthday. What my family didn't know was that I was well known to the staff there. Learning Bridge had hosted several charity galas at Lucille, and I had developed a friendly relationship with Emmanuel, the owner, and much of his staff. I arrived about 15 minutes early, wanting some time to center myself before facing my family. As I stepped off the elevator into the restaurant's elegant foyer, I was immediately greeted by Sophia, the head hostess. Ms. Wilson, lovely to see you again, she said warmly.
혜슬아,
I'm here for my father's birthday dinner tonight. The reservation should be under Wilson. Of course, I see it here. The private dining room has been prepared as requested. She hesitated, looking slightly confused. I didn't realize this was your family event. Emmanuel will want to know you're here. Actually, Sophia, I said quietly, I'd appreciate it if you and the staff could be discreet about knowing me. My family isn't, well, they don't know about my company or my success. It's a long story. Sophia raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course, Ms. Wilson. We'll be discreet. I took a seat in the bar area to wait, ordering a sparkling water. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the city spread out below, lights beginning to twinkle as the sun set. The view always calmed me, reminding me that there was a whole world beyond my family dynamics. 20 minutes later, I spotted my family arriving. First came my parents, my mother in an obviously expensive gown, dripping with jewelry, my father in a tailored suit, looking distinguished but tired. They were followed by Diana and her husband Richard, both looking like they had stepped out of a luxury magazine. Last to arrive was Thomas, making a show of handing his keys to the valet, ensuring everyone saw his latest sports car. I took a deep breath and approached them, gift in hand. Happy birthday, Dad, I said, giving him a hug and presenting the wrapped book. He returned the hug somewhat stiffly. Stephanie, thank you for coming. His attention was already drifting to a group of business associates who had just arrived, also invited to the celebration. My mother looked me up and down with a critical eye. Couldn't you have made more of an effort for your father's special day? She whispered. That dress looks like something off the clearance rack. It's nice to see you too, Mom, I replied, keeping my tone light. Diana air-kissed my cheek, then whispered, God, Steph, even the hostesses here are dressed better than you. Try to not embarrass us in front of Dad's friends, okay? Thomas arrived last, clapping me on the shoulder with a forced joviality he reserved for people he considered beneath him. Baby's sister. Still rocking the budget look, I see. If you ever want some advice on investing what little you make so you can afford some decent clothes, your big brother's got you covered. I forced a smile, already feeling the familiar mix of hurt and anger that family gatherings typically evoked. My father was now completely engaged with greeting his business associates, barely acknowledging me. I stood to the side, watching as my family charmed and impressed the gathering crowd, feeling like an outsider as I had so many times before. After about 20 minutes of mingling in the reception area, the maitre d' approached my father. Mr. Wilson, your private dining room is ready now. Please follow me. My family and the dozen or so business associates began to move as a group toward the back of the restaurant. I fell into step behind them, clutching my small purse, already feeling the familiar sense of being the afterthought, the family member who was included out of obligation rather than desire. As we approached the private dining room, Diana suddenly turned and pulled me aside, her manicured hand gripping my arm just a little too tightly. Stephanie, she said in a low voice, though loud enough that those nearby could hear. Don't you think you're a bit underdressed for this occasion? This is Lucille, for God's sake. I looked down at my simple black dress. I think I look fine, Diana. It's Dad's birthday, not a fashion show. Her expression hardened. This dinner is costing hundreds per plate. Can you even afford to contribute to Dad's gift from all of us? Thomas and I each put in $5,000 for the golf trip to Scotland. Before I could respond, Thomas joined us, a champagne flute in his hand. Problem here? Dinner's about to start. I'm just concerned that Stephanie might not be comfortable in such an upscale place, Diana said, her voice dripping with false concern. The menu doesn't even list prices. Thomas's face took on the condescending expression I knew all too well. Oh, don't worry about that. I can cover little Steph's dinner, if she's short on cash. What's family for, right? He chuckled, looking around to make sure others had heard his generosity. My mother approached next, drawn by the delay. What's going on? Everyone's waiting. Nothing, Mom, I said, trying to move past them. Let's go in. Actually, my mother said, her voice dropping to a whisper, perhaps it would be better if you waited in the bar until dinner concludes? Some very important clients of your father's are here, and the focus should really be on him, not on. She gestured vaguely at my outfit. I felt a flush of anger and embarrassment rising to my cheeks. You want me to skip Dad's birthday dinner because you're embarrassed by how I look? Don't be dramatic, Diana snapped. We're thinking of you too. You'll just feel out of place with all these successful people. I tried to defuse the situation with humor. Last I checked, you didn't need a certain income level to eat cake. No one laughed. Instead, Diana physically moved to block the entrance to the private room. We only want successful people here, she sneered. This restaurant is too expensive for you. Thomas nodded in agreement. Seriously, Steph, you'd be more comfortable somewhere more your speed. Like an Applebee's. He and Diana shared a laugh. I became acutely aware that we were creating a scene. Nearby diners were glancing our way, and even some of my father's business associates had noticed the confrontation. My father himself stood talking with some friends, either oblivious to what was happening or choosing to ignore it. The public humiliation was worse than anything they had said. I felt like I was shrinking, becoming smaller and less significant with each passing second. My chest tightened, and for a moment I feared I might actually cry, something I had promised myself I would never do in front of my family again. I caught sight of my mother pretending not to know me when a woman she knew from her country club glanced curiously in our direction. Just someone who got lost, I heard her murmur to the woman with an embarrassed smile. The rejection stung like a physical slap. Despite everything, some part of me had held on to the hope that beneath all the materialism and status-seeking, my family still loved me for who I was. That hope now felt foolish and naive. A flood of childhood memories washed over me, each one a precursor to this moment. Being seated at the kids' table long after my siblings had been invited to dine with the adults, my academic achievements ignored while Diana's and Thomas's were celebrated lavishly, being introduced to my parents' friends as our other daughter, without any of my accomplishments mentioned. I was so caught up in these painful thoughts that I barely noticed when a security guard approached, drawn by the commotion we were causing. Is there a problem here? He asked, his tone professional but firm. Diana turned to him with a practiced smile. No problem at all. My sister was just leaving. Her smug expression said it all. She expected the security guard to escort me out, providing the final humiliation in her campaign to exclude me from the family celebration. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. My hands trembled slightly, and I gripped my purse tighter to hide it. The moments stretched out, each second an eternity of mortification. I saw Thomas's satisfied smirk, my mother's averted gaze, and worst of all, my father's continued indifference as he chatted with his friends, his back to the unfolding drama involving his youngest child. The security guard looked at me more closely, and his expression suddenly changed from stern to surprised recognition. Ms. Wilson, he said. Then, with a respectful nod, Madam CEO, your usual table is always available if you'd prefer. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear the mental gears grinding as my family processed what they had just heard. Before anyone could respond, the restaurant manager appeared, moving quickly across the floor with a look of concern. Ms. Wilson, he said, addressing me directly. We didn't realize you'd be joining your family tonight. Is everything all right? His tone made it clear that I was a valued guest, someone whose satisfaction was a priority. Diana's mouth had fallen open, and she was looking between me and the manager with complete confusion. Thomas's smirk had frozen on his face, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The situation escalated further when Antoine, the head chef, emerged from the kitchen in his whites. He headed straight for our group, beaming. Ms. Wilson, what a pleasure to see you tonight. I've been experimenting with that truffle risotto you enjoyed last time. I'd be honored to prepare it specially for you and your family. My mother's expression was transforming from embarrassment to bewilderment to calculation, all within the span of seconds. My father had finally turned from his conversation, noticing the commotion, and was watching with genuine surprise. Thank you, Antoine, I replied calmly. That would be lovely. Emmanuel, the owner of Lucille, chose that moment to appear, completing the parade of staff coming to greet me. Stephanie, had I known you were coming, I would have prepared the private balcony for you and your family. He turned to my stunned relatives. Your daughter hosted our most successful charity gala last month. Raised over $2 million for educational programs in underprivileged areas. Actually, I said quietly, these are my parents and my siblings. Emmanuel looked confused. But I thought, when you purchased the building last year, you mentioned it was an investment unrelated to family? The bombshell dropped. Not only did the staff know me as a regular patron and a successful CEO, but I actually owned the building that housed Lucille, one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in the city. I watched as the power dynamic shifted completely. Diana's face had drained of color. Thomas was straightening his posture, his expression morphing from condescension to recalculation. My mother looked like she might faint, while my father simply stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. The feeling washing over me was complex. There was a certain satisfaction in seeing their shocked faces. I won't deny that. After years of dismissal and condescension, the validation felt momentarily sweet. But there was also a profound sadness. It had taken this public revelation of my wealth and status for them to look at me with something approaching respect. The test I had set for them, hoping they might value me for myself rather than my achievements or possessions, had been definitively failed. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'd be happy to join my father's birthday celebration if I'm still welcome. Diana, ever the quick recovery artist, immediately switched tactics. Of course you are. It was just a silly joke that got out of hand. Right, Thomas? Thomas nodded vigorously. Absolutely. Sister humor. You know how we tease. My mother had already slipped her arm through mine, as if we had been the closest of confidants all along. Darling, you should have told us about your company. All this time, we thought. I know what you thought, I said quietly, disengaging my arm from hers. And that's exactly why I didn't tell you. Emmanuel, sensing the tension, smoothly intervened. The Wilson party's private room is ready. Shall I escort you all? Yes, thank you, I replied. As we walked toward the dining room, now with me mysteriously at the front of the procession rather than trailing behind, I made a decision. I could handle this revelation with bitter triumph, throwing their previous treatment back in their faces, or I could take the high road. For my own peace of mind, and out of a lingering love I still felt for my family despite everything, I chose the latter. The staff ushered us to what everyone in the restaurant knew as Stephanie's usual table, the best in the house, with its panoramic views of the city skyline. My family followed in uncharacteristic silence, the normal jockeying for position and attention temporarily suspended as they processed the seismic shift in their understanding of their unsuccessful daughter and sister. As we took our seats, I caught my father's eye across the table. For the first time in years, he was looking at me with genuine curiosity instead of distracted tolerance. I wasn't sure yet if that represented progress or just another form of conditional interest, but it was at least a change. The private dining room at Lucille was everything you would expect from a restaurant of its caliber. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the immaculately set table. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city lights. A string quartet played softly in the corner. My family and my father's business associates settled into their seats, with me now placed prominently near my father rather than at the far end of the table where I would normally have been relegated. The restaurant staff bustled around us, presenting menus bound in soft leather and describing the evening's specials with practiced elegance. I noticed Diana positioning herself next to one of my father's wealthiest clients, clearly trying to network. Thomas was doing the same on the other side of the table. Old habits die hard. So, Stephanie, Diana said loudly enough for everyone to hear, tell everyone about your company. I've always been so proud of my successful sister. I raised an eyebrow at her. Just an hour ago, she had been physically blocking me from entering this very room. Yes, do tell us, Thomas chimed in. I always knew you were up to something impressive. All that secrecy. So mysterious. He gave a forced laugh. My mother was already regaling the woman next to her with an entirely fictional account of how she had always supported Stephanie's entrepreneurial spirit. She gets it from me, she was saying. I always encouraged her to think outside the box. The entire scene was surreal. The same people who had been embarrassed by my presence were now trying to bask in my reflected success. The transformation would have been comical if it weren't so painfully transparent. Throughout the appetizer course, I answered questions about Learning Bridge politely but briefly. Yes, I had founded it 5 years ago. Yes, it provided educational software to underfunded schools. No, I had not sought publicity for my role. As the main course was served, several business associates from nearby tables stopped by to greet me. One was a major investor in educational technology. Another ran a foundation that had partnered with Learning Bridge on several projects. Each interaction seemed to physically pain my siblings, who were realizing just how connected and respected I was in circles they had been trying to break into for years. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" my father finally asked during a lull in the conversation. It was the first direct question he had asked me all evening. The table fell silent, everyone suddenly interested in my answer. I set down my fork and looked around at the expectant faces of my family. The moment of confrontation had arrived, and despite my resolution to take the high road, I knew I needed to be honest. "I didn't tell you because it wouldn't have mattered," I said quietly. "Not in the way that should matter between family members." "What do you mean?" my mother asked, looking genuinely confused. "Of course it would have mattered. We would have been so proud." "That's exactly my point," I replied. "You're proud now, because I'm successful by your standards. But for years, when you thought I was just managing a bookstore, did you ever ask me if I was happy? Did you ever show interest in my life or my choices?" Diana shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "We were concerned about you. We wanted more for you." "No," I said firmly. "You wanted me to be more like you. There's a difference." I turned to my father. "Dad, do you remember when I was 12 and won the state writing competition? My story was published in a magazine, and I was so excited to show you. But that was the same day Diana got accepted to Harvard, and no one even remembered to go to the award ceremony." My father looked down at his plate, a flash of guilt crossing his face. "Or when I made honor roll every semester in high school, but it was never celebrated because Thomas was in medical school, and that was real achievement." I continued. "We were just pushing you to reach your potential," my mother interjected. "No, you were teaching me that my worth was tied to a very specific kind of success," I countered. "When I left corporate America to pursue something I believed in, something that would make a difference, you all treated me like I had failed. The only metric that mattered to any of you was money and status." Diana's face hardened. "So, you lied to us for years. You let us believe you were struggling financially while you were secretly building some tech empire. How is that not manipulative?" "I didn't lie," I said. "I just didn't volunteer information. I wanted to know if you could respect me and my choices without the validation of wealth. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I've accomplished or acquired." "That's not fair," Thomas argued. "You set us up to fail a test we didn't know we were taking." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But think about it. Would we be having this conversation if the security guard hadn't recognized me? Would I even be sitting at this table? Or would I be alone at the bar, excluded from my own father's birthday because I didn't look successful enough?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. I looked around at the faces of my family members, seeing the defensiveness, the embarrassment, and in some cases, the beginning glimmers of genuine reflection. "I don't want an apology," I said. "And I'm not trying to ruin Dad's birthday. I just want you all to understand that the way we've related to each other as a family has been broken for a long time. Tonight just made it impossible to ignore anymore." My father cleared his throat. "Stephanie, would you join me on the terrace for a moment? I think we need to talk privately." As we stood to leave the table, I noticed the mixture of emotions on my siblings' faces. Diana looked defensive and angry, but also confused, as if her worldview had been challenged in a way she couldn't immediately dismiss. Thomas appeared calculating at first, but there was something else there too, a hint of genuine introspection that I hadn't seen from him in years. My mother simply looked lost, her social script for the evening completely disrupted. For once, she didn't have a ready comment or a practiced smile to deploy. I followed my father to the private terrace, unsure of what would come next but feeling, for the first time in years, that something real might finally be said between us. The terrace was quiet, a peaceful contrast to the tension-filled dining room we had left behind. The city spread out below us, a tapestry of lights against the night sky. My father stood at the railing, looking older and more vulnerable than I had seen him in years. "I had a whole speech prepared for tonight," he said after a moment. "About my journey, from nothing to success. About legacy and hard work. It all seems rather hollow now." I waited, giving him space to continue. "When did we go wrong with you, Stephanie?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "When did I stop seeing you?" The question cut straight to the heart of the matter, and I felt unexpected tears spring to my eyes. "It was gradual," I replied. "When I was little, you used to tell me that character mattered more than cash. You taught me to value honesty and integrity. But as the business grew, as we moved into bigger houses and more exclusive neighborhoods, something changed. Success started to mean only one thing: money and the status it bought." My father nodded slowly. "I grew up with nothing, you know that. There were winters when we couldn't afford to heat the whole house. Nights when dinner was just bread and whatever vegetables were cheapest that week." He sighed deeply. "I promised myself my children would never know that kind of insecurity. Somewhere along the way, providing security turned into chasing status."
"I understand that, Dad."
"I do. But in protecting us from material insecurity, you created a different kind of insecurity. One where we never felt sure of your love unless we were achieving in ways you valued." He turned to face me fully.
"I'm sorry, Stephanie."
"Truly. It's no excuse, but I never saw it happening. And now I find out that my youngest daughter, the one I've been worried about and honestly a little embarrassed by, is actually more successful than any of us." I shook my head. "That's still missing the point. My company's success isn't what makes me worthy of your respect or attention." "I know," he said quietly. "I know that now. Or I'm beginning to." He hesitated, then asked, "The medical treatment I received after my heart attack, the experimental procedure that wasn't covered by insurance, was that you?" I nodded. The procedure had cost nearly $500,000, and I had anonymously covered the cost when I learned my father had been denied by his insurance. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Would you have accepted it if you knew it came from me? From the daughter you thought was barely making ends meet at a bookstore?" He had no answer for that, which was answer enough. "I'd like to get to know you again, Stephanie. The real you. Not as a successful CEO or whatever titles you've earned, but as my daughter. If you'll give me that chance." The sincerity in his voice moved me. "I'd like that too, Dad." When we returned to the table, the atmosphere had shifted. My father seemed more present, more engaged with everyone around him, but especially with me. Throughout the remainder of the dinner, he asked me questions about my life, my company, my passions, listening with genuine interest rather than the distracted politeness I had grown accustomed to. After dessert was served, my mother asked me to accompany her to the ladies' room, an obvious pretext for a private conversation. Once we were alone, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I don't know what to say, Stephanie. I feel like I don't know you at all." "That's because you never tried to," I replied, not unkindly. "You were too busy trying to make me into someone else." "I just wanted you to have everything I didn't," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "You don't know what it was like for me growing up. The shame of wearing secondhand clothes, of living in the wrong neighborhood. When I met your father and we started to succeed, I promised myself my children would have every advantage." For the first time, I saw my mother clearly, not as the polished social climber she had become, but as the insecure girl she had once been, still driving her decisions decades later. "Mom, I understand wanting to protect us from what hurt you. But you have to see that you were imposing your fears and insecurities on us, especially on me because I didn't conform to your idea of success." She nodded slowly. "Your sister and brother were easier. They wanted the things I thought they should want. You were always different, asking questions I didn't have answers for." She looked at me with new eyes. "I'm proud of what you've built, Stephanie. I just wish I understood it better." "That's the thing, Mom. You never asked. But it's not too late to start." Our conversation wasn't a magical fix for years of misunderstanding, but it was a beginning. I set clear boundaries about what I would and wouldn't accept going forward, and for perhaps the first time, my mother really listened. When we returned to the party, Diana cornered me by the dessert table. "So you've been secretly judging us all this time," she began, defensive as ever. "No more than you've been openly judging me," I replied. She flinched at that. "I've been successful by any metric. I worked hard to get where I am." "I've never questioned your work ethic, Diana. What I've questioned is the way you've measured your worth, and mine, solely by external markers of success." "Says the secret millionaire," she scoffed, but there was less conviction in her voice. "The point isn't how much money I have or don't have," I explained. "It's that even when you thought I had very little, you could have still treated me with respect and interest. You could have valued my happiness in a career I supposedly loved. Instead, you saw me as an embarrassment to be managed." Diana was quiet for a moment, considering my words. "I've been jealous of you," she finally admitted, the confession clearly difficult for her. "Even when I thought you were just working at that bookstore." "Jealous? Of what?" "You seem content. Free in a way I never felt. Do you know what it's like working 80-hour weeks at a job you hate because you're afraid of disappointing everyone if you admit you made a mistake?" It was a moment of rare vulnerability from my always composed sister. "Why do you stay then?" I asked. "What else would I do? This is who I am. Who I've made myself into. It's never too late to change direction, Diana. Trust me on that." Our conversation wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was the first honest exchange we'd had in years. Diana's defensiveness was deeply ingrained, but I saw cracks in the facade, hints of the sister I remembered from our childhood before status and achievement had become her entire identity. Thomas approached me as the evening was winding down. "So, all this time, while I've been showing off my cars and my celebrity clients, you've been building something that actually matters," he said, with uncharacteristic self-awareness. "Your work matters too, Thomas. Helping people feel confident in their appearance isn't nothing." He shrugged. "Some of it matters. A lot of it is just vanity, and I know it. I haven't operated on a genuine medical need in years." He looked at me curiously. "Are you happy, Steph? With your life, your company, all of it?" The question surprised me, especially coming from Thomas. "Most days, yes. I believe in what I'm doing. It's not always easy, but it feels meaningful." He nodded thoughtfully. "I don't know if I can say the same. I've been chasing the next achievement, the next status symbol, for so long that I'm not sure what I actually want anymore." He gave a rueful smile. "Pretty pathetic, huh?" "Not pathetic," I said. "Human. We all get caught up in external validation sometimes." "Some more than others," he acknowledged. As the birthday cake was brought out and everyone sang to my father, I looked around at my family with new eyes. They were still flawed, still carrying the insecurities and status anxiety that had defined our relationships for years. But tonight had cracked open something real, creating space for more authentic connections if we were brave enough to nurture them. Before the evening ended, I invited them all to visit Learning Bridge the following week. To my surprise, they accepted. The company visit was an eye-opening experience for them. They saw me in my element, leading a team of dedicated professionals who clearly respected me not because of my title, but because of how I led. They toured our development floor where engineers and educators worked side by side to create software that adapted to different learning styles and needs. They heard testimonials from schools in underserved communities where our programs had helped raise literacy rates and math proficiency. Most impactfully, they learned about the humanitarian projects funded by the company's foundation, the schools we had helped build in developing countries, the scholarship programs for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds, the teacher training initiatives in communities that struggled to retain qualified educators. I didn't show them these things to boast, but to help them understand what actually mattered to me, what success looked like through my eyes rather than theirs. And slowly I began to see signs that they were at least trying to understand. 6 months after that revelatory birthday dinner, much had changed in my family. The transformation wasn't instant or magical, but it was real and ongoing. My father surprised me the most. Within weeks of learning about Learning Bridge, he had started a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, leveraging his business experience and connections to help them navigate challenges he understood all too well from his own journey. He called me regularly, sometimes for advice about the program, sometimes just to check in and have the kinds of conversations we had missed for so many years. I was defining success too narrowly, he told me during one of our lunch meetings. Watching you with your team, seeing the impact of your work, it's made me reevaluate a lot of things. My mother's transformation was slower and more reluctant. Old habits of status seeking and social positioning were deeply ingrained, but even she showed signs of change. She began volunteering once a week at a community center in a neighborhood she would previously have avoided entirely. At first, she did it grudgingly, as a concession to the new family dynamic, but gradually, I noticed her speaking about the people she met there with genuine interest and respect. Diana, ever the pragmatist, found a way to align her career with more meaningful work without abandoning her hard-earned position. She started taking on pro bono cases for educational access and equity, using her legal expertise to fight for students from marginalized communities. It suited her competitive nature while channeling it towards something beyond personal advancement. "I'm still working insane hours," she admitted during one of our newly instituted sister dinners. "But for the first time in years, I don't mind. Some of these cases actually matter." Thomas perhaps underwent the most dramatic change. After much soul-searching, he shifted his practice to include a significant portion of reconstructive work for accident victims and survivors of violence, particularly those who couldn't afford such procedures. He still maintained his lucrative cosmetic practice, but the balance had shifted noticeably. "I had forgotten why I went into medicine in the first place," he told me. "It wasn't for the status or the money, at least not originally. It was because I wanted to help people feel whole again." As for me, my own journey of healing continued. The initial pain of rejection at the restaurant had left scars. I couldn't deny that. There were still moments when I wondered if my family's newfound respect and interest was truly for me as a person or just another form of status recognition. Family relationships are complex, layered with history and expectation, and they don't transform overnight. But I was learning to find peace within myself, to validate my own choices without needing their approval. The truth was, I hadn't been completely honest with myself about my reasons for hiding my success all those years. Yes, I wanted to be loved for who I was rather than what I had achieved. But I had also been protecting myself from vulnerability, using secrecy as a shield against potential rejection. Now I was learning to be more authentic with them, to share both my successes and my struggles, to allow them to know the real me with all my complexity. Sometimes they rose to the occasion beautifully, sometimes they fell into old patterns. We were all works in progress. Our family dinners, once performances of achievement and status, gradually became more genuine. We still had moments of tension and misunderstanding, but there was also laughter, vulnerability, and a growing ability to see and accept each other as we truly were. Learning Bridge continued to thrive and expand. We launched new initiatives focused on providing educational technology to refugee communities and developing tools for students with learning differences. I found myself increasingly passionate about creating pathways to opportunity for young people regardless of their background or circumstances. My father and I even began working together on an educational foundation that combined his business acumen with my technological innovation. It was a collaboration neither of us could have imagined a year earlier, one that drew on the best of what each of us had to offer. The profound lesson I took from this entire experience was that true worth isn't measured by wealth, achievements, or social status. It's found in integrity, in living according to your values, in creating positive impact in whatever sphere you inhabit. Success that comes at the cost of authentic connection is no success at all. I also learned that people can change, even after decades of entrenched patterns. My family was far from perfect, and our new relationships required constant nurturing and occasional course correction. But the progress we had made proved that it's never too late to build something more genuine, more satisfying, more aligned with our deepest values. That night at Lucille, when my family tried to exclude me for not meeting their standards of success, became a turning point rather than an ending. It forced a reckoning that, painful as it was, created space for growth and renewal. Sometimes it takes a moment of complete breakdown to build something better. As I look back on that evening and everything that followed, I'm reminded that authenticity eventually reveals who truly belongs in our lives and the terms on which they belong. Some relationships deepen when faced with truth, others dissolve, and that's as it should be. The connections that remain, tested by honesty and rooted in mutual respect, are the ones worth nurturing. Has your family ever judged you based on superficial measures of success? Have you ever had to stand up for your own definition of what matters in life? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of moving from rejection to reconciliation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about authentic connection and personal growth. Thank you for listening. And remember that your worth is never defined by others' limited perceptions of success.